Bienvenidos to Humans in Accounting, the podcast where we pause the AI buzz for a minute and focus on the real humans behind the numbers. We chat with founders and leaders to hear their journey, what drives them, and the important things in life. Because behind every balance sheet, there's a story worth telling. Humans in Accounting is brought to you by South Offices. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humans in Accounting, where leaders share their story behind these spreadsheets. As you probably know by now, I'm Alex Roman, and this podcast is brought to you by South Offices, connecting accounting talent across borders. Today's guest, I'm happy just to introduce Justin Lund, founder at Propel. Justin, welcome to Humans in Accounting. I'm happy that we're doing this episode together.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. We actually talked we never met each other, but we talked for the first time, when was it, last week or the week before? I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but anyways, you shared the story with me, and I thought it was a great idea just to invite you here in Humans in Accounting. You know, the spirit of this podcast is just to talk a little bit more about the human part and the accounting industry. And well, you have a lot of stories, so let's start from the beginning. If you can share with us a little bit about your background, what you've been doing, that'll be great. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay, you got it. So I've kind of had an entrepreneurial streak ever since I was a kid. I remember selling lemonade on the corner by my house, when I was 7, 8 years old. And then when I was 9, trying to get my neighbors to sit at the booth so I could do something else while they sold my lemonade for me. And I think that came from a lot of things. My dad was an entrepreneur earlier on in his life, and my brother particularly brought in Tony Robbins tapes, when they were tapes, cassettes, into our house in the early 80s. I was a little guy, and he just said, yeah, you can take these, listen to them whenever you want. I thought it was pretty neat because I knew they were really expensive. And then I started listening to this big guy talk about flying his helicopter into his own events. I thought, whoa, that seems like an awesome life to have. So that was kind of my introduction to the entrepreneurial endeavors, and it just kind of stuck with me. And so I did different things. I always held a job. I always had walking around money. That was kind of important to me as my youth. And because I came from a big family. We had 9 kids, and there weren't rich. We weren't, we did okay. There wasn't just extras of everything. It was always just a lot of kids to feed, a lot of things going on.
Right.
Yeah.
You're the oldest one, the youngest one, in the middle? The youngest one.
The youngest one, yep. So I thought I always wanted to kind of have enough money and have be able to pay for the things that I wanted to have without being told that it wasn't enough and things like that. And then as I got older and started going through, I loved the psychology of what Tony Robbins, those things. I got into more and more of those books as I became a little more mature. I loved Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, all these guys that kind of based their motivation in a psychology background. And I ended up going to college, and in college, thought, well, I love psychology. I'm going to go into psychology courses. The psychology and sociology courses were they were grooming you for a path of social work or therapy, and I did not like that at all. So those things kind of became boring to me pretty quickly. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And to put myself through college, I had a job in sales, and that's where the psychology and the practical use of it really started to kind of connect for me. And I thought, okay, this is where I can use that stuff. And I started to pitch deals and try to make sales as though I were Tony Robbins or Zig Ziglar or, Brian Tracy and some of these motivational speakers. And so that was fun. It was fun for me. But the environment was kind of toxic. That's where sales guys are kind of going through repetition mode all the time, always up, highs and lows, big payoff, big close. Drugs were rampant in the sales floor, and that I fell into that crowd. And then, so fast track some of those. We got married, got pregnant, then we got married. I'm struggling through the sales job and an addiction that's starting to get a little bit more serious. And that landed.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Justin. This is in your just
Yeah. Yeah.
to understand.
Early 20s, 22, 23.
Early 20s. All right. Okay.
So the marriage came a little faster than we were planning because of the pregnancy, and that so that added to some pressure of a young, immature young man that I was. So I'm trying to make sales to now support the family, and just in that environment that was not as conducive to health and success, the total of it. So that the short version is, I know we don't have all the time in the world. So the short version is legal troubles, arrested for drugs, had to go into rehab as a way to try to stay out of jail long term, like prison time. Went into rehab, learned really a lot more about psychology, my psychology, not just general principles, but had a team of excellent people to help me learn about me.
Really
And
sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you on this one, but
no.
I'm curious. I really want to know because sometimes, I don't know. I heard stories that when you go on, maybe it's different in Argentina and in the States, it's like everything actually works. But sometimes when you go like to rehab, it doesn't really work. In your case, no, it was, I mean, you've learned and it was definitely like a good option, right?
Yeah, I've never used drugs since. And that was the
Okay.
last day. I mean,
Okay.
that was 20, I don't know, 20 plus years ago. So
Okay.
but I know what you're saying. There are a lot of people that go, the relapse rates, I think is how they would refer to that. The relapse rates are very, very high. There were people that in the same rehab that I was in that were just getting done as I got there and that came back before I left, that had gone out, relapsed, or come back. So I think the difference, Alex, was that on the second day I was there, I checked in one day and all the therapy and everything was over. It was in the evening. And the next day, that first night was just terrible. I was scared out of my mind. I thought my wife was going to be gone. My kids, I had 2 kids now.
Right.
I was in such a bad place, a dark place. And I get up the next morning and we go to the first group and I'm just, again, still scared out of my wits. There's 25 people in this circle, sitting in a circle in a room. And there's one doctor that's kind of leading it in the middle of the circle, at the head of the circle. And then there's another one just kind of on the side of the room. And he's like, we got a new guy here. Let's introduce yourself. And he just started to push my buttons. I said, I'm Justin. I'm this, I'm that. And he's like, I don't give a shit about that. I want to know who you are. I'm like, okay, well, and I was kind of stumped. I was kind of stifled. I was like, well, I'm this. I have 2 kids. And he's like, are you dumb? I was like, what? Like, I'm asking who you are. I don't care what you have. I don't care what you do. I don't care what drugs you like to do. Like, cut the shit. Who are you? And I was like, I don't even remember what I said, but I remember yelling. I was kind of mad. I was kind of frustrated. I was scared out of my mind. And so I kind of chimed back with this, and he's like, there, was that so hard? And then he just moved on to somebody else. And I was like, what?
Whoa.
And then as I sat down, I thought, I've tried to do this so many times. I've tried to quit this crap so long. For years, I've been fighting this. If I'm going to do it, it's going to be in a place like this. This is my last hope. So I'm fucking going all in on this. I will do everything. I will like just wring the sponge of every drop that I can get because I'm tired of this shit. And I just made a commitment and a resolve there, a decision, like with finality was made. And I did. I spent the next 6 weeks just trying to learn everything that I could to try to get out of it. And there was no question that I mean, it's 2 weeks after that, I knew for sure I was never going to do drugs again. I mean, it wasn't I'm an addict and I need to do this and this and this. And no, I was like, fuck that. I'm done. I'm so done. Now, what else can you teach me? What can I learn? How can I learn how to do this? And I began to adopt like some of these old lessons in my life, even before that, began to kind of make sense to me. And then I left rehab with a new way of seeing really a lot of things. It's where my frameworks and procedures, systems kind of mindset started to get really born. It's where it really developed. Because they were teaching me that when you have, you can't control life's coming at you, but you can't control the stimulus, you can't control the response, and you can route it through certain frameworks. And there was an analogy that was particularly powerful that I remember at least once a week, even now, all these years later, that when you have a thought and that thought becomes a habit, it's like paving a road with asphalt or concrete. And that road you can drive over after you've paved a road, it's very smooth. It's very easy to pass. You can drive it easily. But if you now look at the biggest mountain out the window and you try to drive your car up over that mountain where there is no roads, That's what it's like the first time you have a new thought, the first time you
Absolutely.
think. So if your thoughts are drugs or how I solve problems, and you've created this paved super highway, you have to create a new thought, and it takes a lot of effort and energy to do that the first time. But once you've done it the first time, you know it's possible now. You know that that can be done. It was hard, but now you pushed some trees over, you pushed some rocks out of the way. Pretty soon you can pave that same road and it becomes the default path. So having some of those frameworks and analogies and just the knowledge to do that thinking for myself started to create a whole new version of me. And it was awesome. So I came out of that situation after years of not being the greatest human being. I knew that my part of rehab taught me that I needed to prove some of my, all my family out there is not going to be ready to celebrate when I come out, because I didn't have any contact with anybody. It was all, no phones, no nothing. It's just you're working on yourself all day, all night.
How much time was it at the rehab?
It was 45 days
weeks?
when I was in there. Yeah.
45 days. Okay.
That's how long I was there. It's kind of like, it's different for people. It kind of depends on where you're at, but mine was, my experience was 45 days, 6 weeks. Yep.
Okay.
So coming out of there, I was committed now, and I'd learned enough about me that I knew I needed to work on something a little bit more meaningful, and that having dead-end jobs or things that weren't really going to fulfill who I thought I was capable of, that contributed to my drug use, that contributed to some of the dumb behaviors that I continued to exhibit. So I started building a business shortly thereafter. And it was tough because we were sleeping on my mom's living room floor, my wife, myself, 2 kids, 2 babies. And that's just not good for a new marriage, and not to mention all the other stuff that I'd done. Not being honest, just being kind of a shitbag. It was not good. But I was focused and dedicated to this, and I thought, this is something I need to try for myself. I need to prove whether or not I can do this. Over the next year, I built that up to where it was reaching 7 figures. Just over a year, it was a 7-figure business. And I was like, whoa. This is, and I started looking at some of the calculations. I thought I could probably turn this into an 8-figure business before the end of the second year. And that kind of just started.
What was this business about?
It was marketing agency is what I started. And then it kind of transformed a little as I got more clear on what my value proposition was and what I was doing. And essentially I was kind of a glorified broker where I was managing relationships between publishers and different traffic sources, and then companies that were selling products and had offerings that needed to figure out how to bring them to market and get people promoting and driving traffic. So it still was that kind of an agency model, but it was a little more, I kept both parties happy, and I managed the money and facilitated the transactions in between. And then that grew, and it turned into hosting companies and design agencies and branding companies. And so it became a dozen different companies within the next 3 or 4 years. But in the beginning, that was what got started. And we just started getting really good at finding the right people to connect them and facilitate a lot of good growth for both sides. So when I saw that the potential was there, that I was on track to do quite a bit more, that's when some of my limiting beliefs kicked in that I didn't realize were still hiding back there. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is way too big. And I started to get a little scared, a little panicked. And with that, I didn't know how to it was still just me. I was a solo operator at that time. And I started working more. I'm working some days 20 hours. I would work on Saturday for half of the day. I would work on Sunday at least half the day. And on the end of the month, when it was time to reconcile the bank accounts, it was a full day. Even start Saturday night and do full day, because I'm not an accountant. I didn't know how to do that stuff. So it took me really long time just to do basic things that most accountants can do pretty quickly. So that just started to freak me out, because I knew in order to grow, I was going to need to bring in more people, and more people meant more tax reporting, more payroll, more, all these things that every one of them that I could see like right there in front of me, it was just like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that one either. And I just started to kind of freak out a little bit. I was just didn't know what to do. So I started talking to somebody that I knew that had kind of helped me through some things before, mentor sort of relationship. And I was telling him, like, I got this going. I don't know what to do. And I just was looking for advice. And over the next couple of months, that advice had turned into a partnership sort of arrangement. And he positioned himself to come in and provide all the help that I needed and help me just stay in my lane, my sweet spot of what I was doing really well, that was working really well. I didn't realize in the beginning, for 5 years, actually, that he had ulterior motives. And Over the course of the 5 years that we were growing and growing and growing together in the same office space where we worked together every day, he'd come to my house and we'd eat dinner together several times a week. I mean, we did a lot of stuff together. He was 25, 30 years older than me, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still a young man. He's older. I'm looking up to him. But over the course of the next 5 years, there were just millions and millions of dollars that were siphoned out of different bank accounts, put into different fake investments, or just outright just transferred and moved to different companies. And I didn't realize that until the very end as the economy began to shrink in 2010 after the housing collapse of 2009. We fought through 2009, 2010. It just started to shrink. And then there was one big transfer that he moved the last $1.6 million out of the bank and left like $1,000 in the bank account. And that was it. I had no more money.
I was gonna say when you said that this mentor transitioned into being your partner, I was just about to interrupt you and tell you, hey, this is exactly what you need. But well, now that you're mentioning this, probably it was not what you needed it.
It felt like it was exactly what I needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was in this. I mean, I needed something like that. I needed a coach. I needed a mentor. I needed help that I didn't have personally. But what I did was just subjugate. Like I let go of, I just passed everything off. And I just kind of went like this, like, oh, that's numbers. I don't want to deal with that. Oh, I don't want to deal with that. And I just didn't even look that direction.
But Justin, let me ask you, this person was, well, he a mentor, he became your partner. Was he a friend? What was he someone?
Sure.
Yeah,
we were friends before that. There was a connection to our family. I mean, there was very much familiarity. It's not like I just met a stranger and did this.
Right.
I was super familiar with this person beforehand. And that's why it was easy to put my guard down because I don't like accounting. I don't like, you don't see me hanging out in spreadsheets to have a good time ever. And so that's where he lived, and he had a team of people and they were good at it, and things seemed to be working so well for so long. But again, I was unaware because I was just blind by doing this. I was blind to what was actually going on over here all the time. So that turned into a big problem that I had to deal with. Obviously, the big problem, one of them is that I didn't have any money and that it was all gone and kind of just burn things to the ground, if you will.
Well, he left $1,000.
Yeah, so I had that.
Yeah.
So I also started to look into why these things. I started piecing things together, and I started asking questions that I'd never asked before. And so I went and met with some other professionals and found a CPA, found a tax attorney, found a litigating attorney, and just went and said, I don't know really what's going on. My head is spinning. What do I do? And so we started looking at tax returns and did some discovery with the IRS. And we realized that there was a huge gross understatement of revenue for all those years. So when revenue was this big, he only reported this much. So there was more money to use and take. But the problem is my name on all the entities. It was my name on all the bank accounts that he was controlling. So I went into 4.5 years of litigation to try to get the financial picture, try to figure out exactly what happened, and to substantiate that it wasn't me that didn't pay taxes. I needed to kind of prove that so that I could file new tax returns. And when we filed new tax returns, I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of around $4 or $5 million of tax that was owed, that was underreported. And that was 5 years old. The penalties, interest, fines, all accumulating around. I mean, it was getting bigger by the day. And I had to kind of sort through what to do in that situation. So this whole area, Alex, this is what the universe is it's got a sense of humor. Like, oh, you don't like taxes? You don't like accounting? You don't like spreadsheets? How about you spend the next 4 years doing nothing but thinking about taxes, looking at spreadsheets, and reading legal documents from court transactions, from court depositions, and all these different things. And that's all I did. I'd wake up, I'd wake up and meditate and learn how to do things to try to keep my mind quiet from going absolutely crazy. And then I'd take my kids to school, and then I'd come back and I would sit down and I'd start reading legal depositions. I would read yesterday's. I'd grab my highlighter pen and start marking things and adding notes and cross-referencing this and working with a team of accountants and legal professionals to.
I need to ask you what happened with your ex-partner, ex-friend. You called him and he was in Bahamas. He was in China. He just stopped responding.
Yeah,
sorry about that, Justin. My fault. I made a mistake. What happened?
when I asked for, so if you recall, and if you can remember back then in the U.S., there was a lot of banks getting the liquidity of banks was in real crisis that was taking place. The housing markets were collapsing, financial institutions were shuttering. The FDIC was coming in to take over a lot of these federally insured banks, and that was kind of the premise of the last move. He's like, he moved the money, and I'm like, where did that go? He's like, oh, I just put it in different banks because if that bank fails and that's the last of our money, we're in trouble. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And so a couple of weeks later, but it didn't really make sense, but it kind of did. I said, I need some of the money back because I'm going to hire some people and do this and this and this. This is when I started to feel like there's probably something going on and I'm probably absolutely screwed. So I sat down and had lunch with him and said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hire these people. And this is the plan. And this is how we're going to turn a revenue stream on right now that despite the economy, I think we can still start making some good money. And he's like, cool, great, that's fantastic. And we sat there and ate just right here next to each other across the table. And I said, so my wife feels some peace of mind and some assurance. I want to get $600,000 of that back into my account so that she just knows, okay, we got plenty of runway, do what you need to do. And that was kind of just a ploy that I was just using to try to get, because I was kind of testing whether or not everything he was saying is just complete lies. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, okay, sure. That sounds great. You're brilliant. You're going to figure this out. Everything's awesome. And then the next day I called and said, I don't have a transfer. You didn't send the money back. And he's like, what? I can't talk. I tried to call. He didn't take my call. I sent him a text and he said, I'll talk to you later. I said, where's the cash? I need the money back in. You said because I talked about this face to face. And then he responded with, what cash? I'm like, wait, what do you mean? We just had lunch yesterday. This was like 18 hours ago. The cash that I talked about, the 600 grand, he's like, there is no money. I don't know what you mean. I was like, what? So that was the beginning. And one of the last times I communicated with him directly was then. Maybe one or two more times after that. But then I was talking to lawyers and I was figuring out how am I going to dig myself out of this gigantic pit that I'm in now and not having any money to do it. So that's what started that process.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah. And on top of everything now, you have just to deal with the IRS and all the other parts. How were you able to solve that? How did that?
Yeah, it ultimately ended up, it was 4.5 years of a lot of stress. About 4 years, maybe three and a half to 4 years into it. I'd filed new tax returns early on and I'd kind of communicated with the IRS, like, look, this is what happened. I have a litigation. I have cases going on. I'm going to get the money and pay you back. But they're like, you owe us $4 or $5 million. I said, I know, I can't pay it. But I was communicating with them often, like regularly. And so everything was okay. There wasn't too much pressure coming from them until about 3 years in. And then 3.5, I can't remember exactly, but that's when it started to get really intense. And I had to fill out 200 or 300 pages of disclosures for every transaction that I could have. And I had to give them a full breakdown because they thought, I think this kind of came through some of our litigation that some of that are litigating friends over there,
Right,
were trying to put pressure on me in any way that I could be, that pressure could be applied to me so that I couldn't fight with them. Right. If I couldn't show up to depositions as sharp or as ready, and I'm talking like my friends got sued, my family, there was people that were sued they all got thrown out, but it would always take me a month to shift my focus, and I work with my attorneys, pay their bills to go file a response to the lawsuit. There's $15,000 gone to just deal with that. So it was always these like dog and pony shows like that. And I think the IRS was one of them because all of a sudden one day the IRS called and they were freaked out. They were upset. They were angry. And I had to start disclosing all kinds of things. And they're like, we got a tip that you're going to be fleeing the country, I think was one of the comments. I'm like, fleeing where? With what? I mean, I'm broke as shit. I owe my attorneys over $1.5 million right now because I haven't been able to pay them for months. They have a lien against my house. I mean, I was at the bottom of the finance. I mean, I'm fleeing the country to anywhere. I couldn't even get a plane ticket. And so I started going through these disclosures, getting everything to them. But ultimately, I was able to settle the case. I think it was 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin is when we actually settled. I don't think it would have gone well for them if we would have gone to trial. And we had a lot of good proof. We couldn't track down all the money because there was this complicated web of shell companies, over 220 companies, I believe. And they'd start in one state and go to another state, and then they'd end up out of America and places we couldn't get information or subpoena. So there was a big complicated web of financial transactions that was really hard to really pin down. But we were able to settle. The settlement was hard. The settlement money didn't even come to me because the IRS were so concerned that I'm fleeing the country. So the settlement money came into a trust account, and the trust account paid the IRS directly. But I was happy because I had no tax bill, and I wasn't going to look at prison time for filing fraudulent tax returns. So that was the end of that chapter. And then I took some time off shortly after that.
Yeah, vacations, right? Well-deserved vacations with some peace of mind. And when was this? When was that settlement?
10 years ago now. 10 years ago, in the end of like the fall of 2015, I think, and then in 2016, I moved to Hawaii for 6 months, and then just because I needed a break, and now I didn't have the legal fees and everything to worry about, so we moved to Hawaii, and we ended up traveling from Hawaii directly to Europe. We didn't even have our passports, so I had my neighbor go over to my house and get the passports and FedEx them to us in Hawaii, and then we went to Europe. And we spent the next 6 months traveling Europe with no plans. Like we left Hawaii and we had an airline ticket to Oslo, Norway, and an Airbnb for 2 nights. And that's the only plans we had. And we came home 6 months later. So
with your wife and 2 kids?
Wife and 4 kids now.
Because you got 2 more in the middle.
2 more along the way, yeah. Yep, 2 more along the way. The fourth was just born. We were expecting when these things started going on, and the 4th was born right as I realized that the money was all gone. So that was right at the same time.
And when you were in Norway, how old was the 4th one?
4.
4
years old.
All right, yep. And well, that's the best part of I've made a few trips that way, like not really knowing what's gonna be or where I was gonna go, and those. Well, I didn't do it with the 4 kids and my wife, but I made it by myself, and I had a really good time. So yeah, I like those type of trips. But in your case, I guess like after everything you lived, maybe just going to a random beach and having that peace of mind was more than sufficient.
Yeah, So here's the thing, Alex. With all that, I mean, this is a crazy story. It's a crazy series of, from the last decade of chaos that had these really highs and really low peaks. Then going into Hawaii, I was beginning to get involved in business again because I love to build things and be a part of something and create stuff. So I got involved with a software company, Propel. It wasn't called Propel back then, but it brought in people to do bookkeeping and records and things that it started with one friend. She called me and said, "Can you do this for me? I just need somebody to help me set up payroll. It's me and one other employee." I'm like, "I guess, sure." And that was right in the middle of the lawsuit. And that turned into, within 1 year, 50 clients. And we didn't even have a website. We didn't have a company name. We had nothing. But she liked it and told her friends. And then her friends called us. And then their friends called us. And just quickly, we had 50 clients that we were doing that for. And it was nice because that was something I could do that wasn't lawsuit related. Again, I was not in spreadsheets. I would talk to the owners about some of their thoughts. And this is where I started coaching, and did so by accident, because they would have the same kind of ideas about numbers and spreadsheets that I did. And then they would be like, "Okay, you guys just take care of it." I'm like, "Don't do that. That's a bad idea. Can you learn my lesson without having to lose everything, please?" So I started to coach them through that. But after the lawsuit and everything was all over and we moved to Hawaii, I was committed to not trading my time for money. And I had this systems mindset in place, things that we'd built this big company with. And I'm like, I'm going to do this differently this time. I want to really try for a different outcome. And I want to do it with my kids, because I've given up too much time with my kids, and they're young and they've been growing, and I've missed a lot, and I'm not going to miss anymore. So I traveled Europe and traveled Hawaii and traveled Europe without being chained to the companies. I had companies that were running. I had income that was coming in. And there was only one time I remember I had a great assistant who ended up becoming the CFO, because I like accountants being my assistants because they're very detail oriented. They love the spreadsheets. I don't, So I had a great assistant who called me when I was in Switzerland. I was in the Matterhorn Mountain was right there. It was this awesome, just little village. He said, "There's a problem. I need your help. That we have an invoice. I hate to bug you." And I mean, I've hardly talked to them in 7-8 months now.
Right.
I check in like once a month, not much. And it's like, there's an invoice that hasn't been paid, and these guys are pissed, and they're yelling, and they don't know where you are. And so I called him the next morning and said, "Okay, what's going on?" And he kind of in a bit of a panic, like, "I just think it's going to blow up, and they owe us all this money, and then and everything's kind of just fever pitch chaos." I said, "Well, did you follow the playbook that we have on this?" Like, "We don't have anything on this. This never happens." Like, "No, it doesn't. But yes, there is. We have a playbook." So, and I reminded him where it was, and like, "Oh yeah, okay." So grab the playbook. Like, "Okay, run through that, and then let me know if there's a problem. I'll check back in with you tomorrow morning." And I left, and I went about my business, and we went through the day there in Switzerland. Went up on top of this glacier. It was in July or August, and it was super cool. Next day, called, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." "What do you mean?" Like, "They paid yesterday, had a conversation, everything's cool, so we're all set." And that's when I really recognized that if you know how to set up a system, and it wasn't that he was capable, he wasn't following the system. And so I reminded him of the system, and we had these kind of conversations, because early on, it's not like nobody ever people got upset from time to time. There was questions about invoices. So we created this so that there's a fallback. And I knew at that moment that it didn't take more than 5 minutes across 2 days, like 2 minutes one day, 2 minutes another day. And the problem was solved. I didn't get involved other than to remind him. And I just thought, yes, that is what I'm talking about. That creates the same. The invoice got paid. The client took a break and was just relaxing. And it was no big deal. Nothing. I didn't even have to call the client. It was fantastic. And it started by having a good executive assistant. Somebody that had the context, somebody that had the ability to see into all the details. And that's what so many founders out there don't get, is they don't know. They like the idea of an assistant, or they like the idea of delegating, but they just don't know where. They don't know how. So many times I have people say, "I'd love one. I just wouldn't know what to have them do." Right. And that's why I create playbooks around this, so that it takes the guesswork. Because a lot of people also think, well, if I just hire somebody new, that's just going to give me one more job to do. And it's just the wrong way to look at it. So if there's anybody out there that has those kinds of issues, then you need a playbook. You need something to follow. And I'll tell you, if you can have mine, if that's something that you're thinking about, like you might need some extra bandwidth because you're getting caught in too many of the weeds of little things, come over to Instagram and find me, and I'll send you my playbook through DM. It's a Google Doc.
And actually, with this example that you've just said, that's the example, how they called you, like, so worried. Hey, I have a problem with this invoice. What do we do? You just reach out and say, "Hey, have you looked at the playbook?" You talk with them the day after. "No, everything is okay. Don't worry." And
yeah,
so it does work. I need just to ask you one question that it's important for my channel here in the Humans in Accounting. I've been obsessed. I'm passionate about a few things. I don't know. I like sense of humor. For me, it's really important. I like food. I like eating nice food. And I'm asking each guest, and I'm going to ask you this straight question. Okay. Justin, what's your favorite food? I know.
Favorite? My favorite is ice cream. I love ice cream, but
ice cream.
And then I've had a shift here, and I started looking at food more like fuel than, and I don't know if you've seen, I used to be a little bit heavier and have a little bit more softness to me than I do now. I think my favorite is probably now steak, because I just love eating lean meat. And because of that, like, it's lower calorie. I've just looked at it differently for the last, this goes back like 2 years ago. I would always say things around my sons who are athletes, and they play baseball and every sport that has a ball they play. And I'd say, like, "Yeah, I think I should probably lose a little bit of this." And they would just be like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you doing about it? And I recognized that they were thinking they had a system for their health. They would track all their stuff, track macros, they would weigh things when they're eating them. And they're like, if you want to lose it, you just, like, how many calories did you have yesterday? I was like, "Oh,
I have no idea."
Yeah. And so they're like, just measure it, measure everything that goes in your body. And I started doing that, and now my tastes have changed. I still love ice cream. No, it's still my favorite. But I now eat a lot of steak and lean protein meats because that's a lower calorie count, and it gives me a lot of stuff that keeps me a little bit more firm. And I've dropped from like 30% body fat to 8.5%. And so,
and in how much time?
about a year.
Whoa, congrats.
Yeah.
Thinking
Yeah.
of
I'm sure I
the
love
top
it.
foot, I'll stick with the ice cream. I want to ask you a last one, Justin, just to wrap up the episode. I like asking this question to my guests, but I'm gonna really enjoy asking you specifically this question because I wanna ask you for some advice. Well, what would be a good advice that you can give maybe someone starting their own firm, starting their own company for the first time? They're being afraid of, hey, should I jump? Should I not jump? Should I do it? Or what do I do? Maybe someone in the future is watching this episode in Spotify and YouTube or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them? One piece of advice, the most important one.
I would say one of the most important things that you can do from the beginning is getting clear on what matters to you. And if you don't know how to do that, you got to figure that out first. And it seems it's not as fun. It seems ambiguous. It seems stifling and hard. But there's ways and there's people that can do it, that can show you how to get a vision. Because if you have your vision clear and you know where you're going, you can make a decision so much quicker. You can say yes to the right things. It's easier to say no to the wrong things. Like that alignment that you get with clarity is so key. And without it, things feel really, really hard. And they get to be a lot harder as you go. Like if you start a firm and you're just kind of clear, you're going to have a lot more challenges and problems. And if I would have done this, I've done this in different parts of my life. But if I would have had all these stories I've told you, if I would have been clear, it would have been a lot easier to say no to those drugs. It would have been a lot easier to say no to certain partnership arrangements. I would have been focused more on, well, here's the real reason I'm doing this, and that doesn't really make sense. But with a lack of clarity and with a lack of any kind of longer term thinking about it, I was easily bamboozled. I got off track. I got distracted. I lost focus, and those things cost me almost everything. So get clear.
That's a good advice, and I want to add something to that because it's never too late. Because sometimes you don't really know what happened, and you started a business and it's going well, and you're gonna say, no, all right, if this is working, why do I need just to think about this long term that you're mentioning? Think about the vision. It's never too late. It's never too late, and maybe you're already running your business for 3 years. Well, I think it's always a good idea just to do what you said.
For sure.
Not
Absolutely.
that
you can do it anytime. And that's totally true. I'm glad you mentioned that. And a lot of people have this fear that they don't really know. And so they use that as an excuse to say, well, how could I know what I want to be in 10 years or 20 years? And that's just a weak excuse. Because you're a human, you're allowed to change your mind. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, that you should procrastinate, put it off, or just absolutely avoid it altogether. Change your mind. I come back to my goals every quarter. And just this last quarter, my wife and I, we meet, we talk about our goals every quarter. We go get a hotel room for 2, 3, 4 days so that we can leave the noise of the day-to-day life and just focus on what's important for us. And we drop 2 of our main goals for the year. We're just like, no, they don't make sense. Every hour we spend on those goals is really going to be a subtraction from these other goals, and these are more important. So we put them on our calendar for January 1st of 2026. We'll think about it then. But now we don't even think about it. And that kind of peace and clarity was just so easy, so fast. So you can change your mind. Don't use that as an excuse. Get clear. Do the exercise to get clear. Check out, I've got some YouTube videos on how you can kind of go through that process. And it's really kind of fun and enjoyable if you get out of your head.
I love that. I was going to ask you that. People watching in the future, somewhere listening to this story, they want to just to reach out. What's the best way just to get in touch with you, Justin?
Yeah, that's through social media is probably the best thing. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, all of them, TikTok, everything, same handle at It's Justin Lund. And yeah, I'd love to come over, connect, say hi, shoot me a DM. Love it.
Perfect. When we publish this episode, I'll make sure just to put your social media to include it on the comments. Justin, I'm really happy we made this episode together. Thank you. Thank you so much for participating in Humans in Accounting.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Thank you. Bye-bye.